Hi everybody, welcome back to the Am IMA podcast from Newcastle University's Innovation Methodology and Application theme at Newcastle University. My name is Andrew Fuller, I'm your host. I work at the Newcastle University Flow Cytometry core facility, and I'm here today with Joy Allen. Hi Joy, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm not too bad. It's a little rainy day here.
It's horrible outside, it's really miserable. I'm at least sat at home staring at the miserable weather. I don't know if that's any better than sat in your office staring at miserable weather. I don't know what you think.
Well, in our office in the Leach building, we don't have great visibility of outdoors. We have one tiny window. So I actually don't get to look at the rain when I'm in the office, which is not a good thing either.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess that's actually, it leads me on to briefly introduce how we know each other. I don't know you. I've never actually said more than one word to you, which is probably good morning, because you and I work about 5 doors down from each other on the same corridor, in the same building, on the same floor and everything. And I'd just like to say it's really, really nice to finally get a chance to meet you and to find out what goes on in that massive windowless office.
Yeah, it's an L shape as well. It's very strange.
It's an L shape. Oh, okay. It's a very strange building. It's a 60s horrible building anyway. Ours has got all sorts of funny, I think we've still got gas taps in our office. I don't know why.
It's amazing the people you say hello to though, and you don't actually know what they do. And if you actually talk to them, you realize, oh, we should be working together.
Very true. And I found that with a couple of the other interviews I've had on this podcast, that people have thought exactly the same thing. Like, if not, I should have been speaking to you more recently. Then I probably should have been working with you for the last 2 years. We just haven't been. So yeah, that's really good. It's really, really nice to meet you. So I guess we'll just start, if you don't mind. I'm just going to rattle off your job title, because I think it's one of the more impressive and longest job titles I've ever had. So correct me if I get any of this wrong, but I read that you are a senior in vitro diagnostic evaluation methodologist at the NIHR Newcastle in Vitro Diagnostic Co-operative. Is that right?
That's correct. And okay. I was once told the longer your job title is, the useless you are. So
no, not at all.
I don't know what that
Absolutely
means.
Not. In which case, our job title for mine is experimental scientific officer, which is a really long way of just saying scientist. It's fine, but yeah, they just had to add extra words and syllables on. So yeah, you work at I'm just going to call it the MIC. Are you okay with that? Generally, what you refer to it as? Okay.
Yeah, me too.
So, but before that, way back, you did not come from a background of life sciences. Is that right?
Not at all.
What did you study at university undergrad then?
Applied mathematics and theoretical physics. That was what that's what I went to uni to do.
Wow. And that was in Belfast, or?
Yeah, Queen's University Belfast.
Lovely.
I completely struggled with the whole biology, life sciences versus mathematics, and I couldn't decide, and I'm a very indecisive person. And I went and did some work experience in a vet, and I do regret not doing that. I went and did work experience in a blood sciences lab in the south of Ireland, actually, and I really enjoyed that. But it just came down to, I didn't know what vocation I wanted. I wasn't one of these people who's always grown up knowing exactly what they wanted to do. So it came down to what I did better in terms of my subjects. And I think I talked to my dad a lot about it, and he said, well, with maths, you can probably do anything afterwards. So
I mean, he was right. You've held him true to that one, I guess. He's definitely not wrong.
Yeah, and then I chose a course that was more slightly focused on theoretical physics, because I just found that fascinating. And actually, it was one of the open days I went to was a Russian mathematician saying, look out at that tree and try and work out how many leaves on it, and explain some kind of theoretical physics formula for doing that. And I was just like, I want to come and hear more about what you do. So I went to Queen's, that have an amazing centre for theoretical physics and optical physics as well. And yeah, it was great.
Also, on the plus side, having spent a very small amount of time at Queen's College in Belfast for a conference many years. It's my first year at Newcastle. I got taken away to a conference. It's stunning as well. Like it's like super Hogwarts. It's a beautiful place, a beautiful part of the world as well. So yeah, I'm definitely more jealous of your campus than mine, which was Bath University, was built in '66 and looks exactly like it was built in '66. That's amazing. So applied mathematics and theoretical physics. And I mean, I'd love to ask some insightful questions about what exactly that entails, but I was petrified of maths at school. I did it, I was fine at it, but it just used to scare the life out of me. I did, by the sounds of things, the exact opposite. I did what I felt more comfortable doing, which was plants, if I'm honest, and animal cells and all this sort of thing. But so how far down the maths road did you get? Because you did a postdoc at Newcastle as well, right? And that was in a similar field. I have the postdoc title in front of me, but I'm gonna let you explain what it is, because it didn't make a lot of sense to me.
I might need to ask you to remind me of the title. I went to do a PhD in Newcastle, because I think, again, I got to the end of my degree and I was like, I still don't know what I want to do. And I knew I was enjoying the research project. So with any degree, you get lots of taught stuff, but when it comes to actually doing research, it's really different than what you're used to, because you're kind of in your you're in your comfort zone, I think, when you're being taught. And especially with maths, it's so formulaic that you teach yourself how to solve problems, essentially. Sure. But with research, it's a lot more open, and I just really enjoyed that. And I thought, right, I want to do a PhD, but again, I didn't know what I wanted to do a PhD in. And there was a few topics that I was interested in, and I think Bristol had one on quantum chaos, which I enjoyed the sound of, but when I went to speak to the PI, although he was lovely and I loved the place, it was really pure mathematicsy. So if you don't know much about, it's really abstract thinking, and it was a bit too abstract for me. And then I went to meet the PI of the one I was interested in, which I ended up doing in Newcastle, and it sounded amazing. So what I did for my PhD was studying Bose-Einstein condensation. I did.
That's a phrase I've come across in the past. I have no idea what it is, but it's definitely something that I've heard.
Well, it's said to be the fifth state of matter, which is essentially when you cool atoms down to close to absolute zero, they can flow without viscosity, because they all start to behave as one and exist in the same quantum state. And you can do experiments on and look at quantum effects really on a bigger level, to almost see like a super atom. So I was looking at the mathematical modeling of the experiments that were being conducted all over the world, and we were looking at things like propagating waves through and looking at vortices to see how they interact, and trying to come up with new ways of modeling, because that modeling mathematically the gases, because that was the bit that was really not understood, like how they behaved and how we could, what theories were out there really to kind of understand how they behave. So I was on the kind of computational mathematical modeling side of things. But the cool thing was, while I was looking at vortices and how they interact, to try and emulate something called quantum turbulence. And we designed some vortex interactions that then they did experiments on, and I think it was Tübingen in Germany. So that was really cool to actually see experimental evidence of what we were modeling. So there's various different competing theories, so it was quite competitive from that side of things, but quite a small community.
So after the modeling PhD and the work in turbulence and so on and so forth, I was listening. It's just it's very 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 complicated. You carried on down the maths path, though. You carried on down maths and physics. You did a postdoc as well, and that was also at Newcastle. Was that right? Yeah.
Well, the group I was working with, we were quite productive, and the stuff we were starting to do on quantum turbulence was relatively new, and we were working with Durham University as part of a newly formed joint quantum centre between them. So a postdoc came up to primarily build on the work that I had been doing in my PhD, and I applied and was successful, and I was really pleased, because you just don't know when you're going to get a job as an academic. And I didn't want to move. I'd moved my boyfriend at the time over here a few years after I started my PhD, and that's the one concern and worry about postdocing, is that you might have to move anywhere, and I wasn't quite ready. But one of the nice things actually about my job was I was working with people in Germany, as I said, in New Zealand and in Japan. So I got to go to visit Japan quite a lot, postdocing and things. So I was really lucky that way, but I just wasn't quite ready to leave Newcastle. So I was lucky I stayed and did my postdoc for a couple of years. But I always I just had massive imposter syndrome. Like, I loved what I was doing, but I felt like I wasn't completely passionate about it. And if there was always someone that was much more successful and always someone better, and you just always felt like I don't deserve to be at this conference, I don't deserve to be here. And I was supervising students and I felt like they were more clever than I was, and they were better at programming, because again, there was always new people with more languages coming in. I just didn't feel I was completely comfortable. And I then started to think, well, I haven't done anything different. And I always had this thing in the back of my head about, I want to do something more useful now. So the work I was doing had value in 100 years' time, whenever we've got BECs running through our house as our form of energy.
Yes.
But not right now. And I came back to the whole, like, I knew my skills were probably quite valuable if I could get over the imposter syndrome thing. I knew it could be valuable elsewhere. I knew I wasn't a private sector person.
No. Okay.
Yet,
so
maybe.
Didn't want to go straight into massive CRO and work your way up that ladder necessarily.
And I always had the kind of tension of, you do something in financial mathematics and you end up getting like 100k before you're 25 and stuff. But it just, again, didn't fill me with passion. And I knew there was something in the back of my head still about biology and health services and healthcare and medicine. But obviously I was completely naive to that side of the world. Like, I didn't know anything about it really. And then I've just kept an eye out for NHS jobs, and one came up that talked about methodology and mathematical modelling. But I didn't really, again, know what it meant. And if I had known what it meant, I wouldn't have went for it, because I would have thought I couldn't do that.
That's interesting. That's an interesting, like, I mean, I know exactly that feeling that you're describing. Like, the amount of, before I got this job, the amount of job adverts I read and didn't apply for far exceeded the ones I did apply for, just because reading the job description, you think, well, I could do 2 of these, but I can't do all 5. So I won't apply for it. And actually, there might, companies or places of work might be quite willing to teach you the 3 if you can do the 2 hard ones. Like, if you could go along with a huge amount of modeling experience, they don't have to teach someone that programming language. They'll teach you everything else, because they'll bite your hand off for that experience. But yeah, I know it. So I'm very aware of that feeling. But yeah, so you read this NHS job description and you thought, I could only do a little bit of that, but I'll apply for it anyway. So what pushed you over? What pushed you over the hump to apply for it?
I think so. Just back to what you're saying, I think it's an academic trait to want to be able to do all of something before actually applying for it. But I didn't understand what this job talked about, which is why I think I did make I made an informal inquiry to the then deputy director of the group, which was then called the DEC, just to complicate things. But I think if I'd understood it, I wouldn't have applied for it at all. But I applied and talked to him, and he just focused on the fact I came from an applied mathematics background, as he was a consultant pediatrician and a computational whiz and a mathematician in the sidelines. So he focused on that side and didn't focus on the fact that I didn't know anything about the NHS, to be honest. And he just said, you should apply, but not for this job, for a different job. And the other job was a methodologist role rather than the research assistant, which is what the other one was.
I see. Okay.
So I went for it, met the director, and who was John Simpson, and came and talked about the work that I'd done. And that was really all I talked about. And they asked me some questions, which I completely, I have no idea how I got through that interview, because I think the answers I gave were probably so naive. But I don't think they had any other option. I don't think they had any other candidates. So they offered me the job and I took it. And that was the change. So
then so all of a sudden you've gone from applied mathematics and kind of however many year, so if it was a 3-year undergrad and a 2.5-year, 3-year postdoc and a 2-year postdoc and a 3-year PhD, that's a lot of maths years. And then you're thrown all of a sudden into not only a very different field of research and methodology, but a whole different style of working, presumably for the NHS. I mean, it's a very different beast than working in pure academia. So how did I mean, I know it's a very broad question, but how did you find that? How was that like what were those first couple of months like shifting from working from one to the other?
I was completely lost, like, to be completely honest. But I think what saved me probably was we were starting from scratch. So I was the first research associate, or methodologist, as we call people that work in our group, as part of the group. So we were working out on our feet how we could add value. And you're right, it's completely new type of infrastructure for both the university and the NHS, in that we're quite impact driven and industry focused and applied research. So we basically started from scratch and met with, our remit really was about helping small companies, so SMEs and diagnostic developers, understand what research they needed to carry out to approach the NHS with their new diagnostics. And the angle we were coming at from the NIHR's perspective is to increase that methodological expertise in the UK, and also to ensure that diagnostics are delivered in better diagnostics are delivered quicker into the NHS for patient benefit. So the funding actually that was available for DEX, as it was then, and now MICS, was actually lobbied for by industry. So we were...
Oh, interesting. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. That's interesting. Okay.
So we were essentially meeting with companies to understand what their challenges were, whilst finding our feet to understand, well, do we have the right skills to actually help them design these evaluations and conduct them, and also ensure we were meeting the metrics by NIHR and doing projects at the same time. So, like, methodologist, if anyone asks me what that means, to me it essentially means jack of all trades and problem solver. We're not like we're not focused in terms of very, very, very specialist skills, apart from the broad specialist skill, which is diagnostic evaluation. So it's very new from a university perspective, and new then from the trust perspective, in that it's quite applied research, which wouldn't ordinarily be done. So that's probably what saves me.
Yeah, but it's a incredibly unique kind of position to be in. It's always been a bit of a, whenever I walk past your office door, I know I can always have a look at the door, because the number of different logos that have changed on that piece of paper on the front of that door is far more often that it's changed on the front of mine, for example. I've always been intrigued as to which kind of branch you kind of feed into. It kind of sounds like you feed into all of them. You have to have the industry connection, because they're the people who want to get their diagnostic tests in. You have to have that university connection, because they're the people who might be creating brand new diagnostic tests that you need to link up to industry to get them developed. And you have to talk to the NHS to see how you can fast track or speed those pieces of diagnostic expertise, or whatever methods or gadgets or whatever, to get them actually useful and in the hands of clinicians at the bedside. So, I mean, it's no wonder I couldn't figure out who exactly you're reporting to. It sounds like you're reporting to absolutely everybody, which is it must be a huge challenge. So that's
exciting one, though.
Yeah, massively, especially. So, I mean, I don't talk too much about COVID. I started this podcast in the middle of the pandemic, because it's something I could do from my office and home. But I guess for you specifically, the change in what COVID has brought to diagnostics and to bring kind of NHS diagnostics into the forefront of what everybody thinks about every single day, at least if they're anything like me. Like, I'm looking at case data and that kind of data mining and data analysis that maybe your layman wasn't doing, they maybe are now. So how has the pandemic impacted you guys, and specifically with the Innovation Hub? Because I know we had a great talk this morning from Caroline and Simon at the Innovation Hub for the IMA, which I'm sure you can find the recording online. That will get emailed out. But I would advise people to go and listen to it, because it's similar to what you had. They're setting something up pretty much from scratch there. They've got access to a shed load of data, and they're trying to figure out what the best thing they can do with the data that they've got. But so how has that impacted your role specifically?
It's been absolutely mental. Everyone's obviously had a crazy time, but so tomorrow marks the 1 year anniversary, according to WHO, actually.
Oh wow! Okay. Well, happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Happy COVID.
What a horrible thing to say. Okay.
I know. I only know that because NIHR are putting lots of case studies out about how the NIHR have helped face the
Okay.
pandemic. But yeah, so what we do in the MIC is that kind of identifying within the NHS how a new diagnostic is going to add value, and we either conduct early economic modelling or stakeholder engagement to look at usability and or design statistical study design for clinical evaluations, and then conduct them and do the analysis. So we were already obviously full to the brim of projects, and then as soon as COVID hit, we just felt like, probably like most people, a bit helpless around the frontline clinicians, and we work directly with a huge number of clinicians within the NHS, mainly in Newcastle, but one of our themes is infection, and Dr. Ashley Price, who is probably one of the busiest men in the world at the moment, he leads our infection theme, and just used to be the director of infection prevention and control in NIHR, so just extremely busy man. So straight away, basically, we just said, what can we do to help? And the team are absolutely amazing and have a huge range of skills, from evidence synthesis to modelling and health economics to statistics. And straight away, he was like, we can't cope with the amount of information that's coming from all over the world, and we don't have the time to read these papers. So we did some rapid reviews on topics that were felt to be of importance from the clinicians in the NHS's perspective, on NIHR's perspective. And then we actually got them published through the Oxford Centre for Evidence-Based Medicine. But quite quickly after that, it became very clear that the life sciences industry was focusing their efforts on rapid COVID tests. And I got asked to be part of the urgent public health panel. So this NIHR prioritization panel for all research in the UK, and there was about 50 to 70 very intimidating, extremely qualified people on this panel.
Imposter syndrome coming back.
But the thing was, there was maybe 2 people that did any focus on diagnostic evaluation. So I think it was John Simpson was involved, and he asked for me to be involved as well. And we got involved in doing the kind of assessment or critical appraisal of any protocols that were coming through the urgent public health panel on diagnostics. And very quickly it became quite apparent that lots of people were doing small pilots at their local institutions of new points of care tests, but they weren't.
Okay, I'm really sorry about that. I am having internet issues today. Apparently my internet doesn't like rain, because this might be the only podcast I've recorded in the rain. I'm not outside, but either way, maybe my cable internet doesn't like the rain. So I'm really sorry about that. But sorry, yeah, you were saying you were in these kind of large, intimidating meetings, and then you and John Simpson were one of the few people with actually the experience that was really relevant, really required for that. So where did it go from there? Sorry, please carry on.
No problem. Essentially the director of the NIHR CRN, Nick Lemoyne, said, okay, there's a lot of small studies coming through about these new diagnostics, but nothing that's going to generate kind of generalizable, transferable evidence across the UK. We've got 4 IVD evaluation MICs across the UK. Can you guys not pull together and develop like a platform for diagnostic evaluation, kind of like the therapeutic platform trials like Recovery, Remap, CAP, etc. So that's what we did. We got together with the other IVD MICs and the Manchester Diagnostic Technology Accelerator, who has like a similar but non-IVD, non-NIHR badged type infrastructure, and then Nottingham University, because they have a focus on care homes and things. So we got together and created a platform trial for diagnostics. That's focused pretty much on all of the work that we do as MICs, but it could do in context evaluations in hospitals, in primary care, in ambulance setting, as well as in the care home setting. And this meant that we pulled together this really big network, which unfortunately it would have been a real benefit if we had this network pulled together prior to the pandemic, because as you've seen, results come out from Remap, CAP and Recovery really early stages, but our platform, which is called Condor, wasn't really up and running until about June, and then we saw a prevalence dip. So we actually were really on the back foot. But
interesting.
The reason why it was so useful is that there's about 1,000 rapid COVID diagnostics already on the Find Diagnostics website, and we were saying, well, how does the NHS work out which to procure?
Yeah, right.
So our idea was to kind of help funnel that down into diagnostics that we felt were robust, added value and accurate in various different contexts. And that was going to inform the Department of Health's procurement, because the Department of Health essentially ended up coming in and helping to frame how this platform could add most value to them. So that's what's taken up so much of our time. We lead one of the work streams within Condor, what's called care pathway analysis, and we do the statistical analysis of the in-hospital context evaluation. So it's been a bit crazy.
To me, it sounds like you just described another 3 people's work that you've managed to do at the same time as doing, because I'm sure the other things that you were doing prior to the pandemic arriving haven't just all of a sudden stopped.
No.
So you still have to do all those other jobs and then handle this massive thing.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. It sounds amazing, like the amount of work that you managed to pull together. I don't think you should maybe don't downplay it, but I'm not sure you do. But it sounds like an insane amount of effort that had to be put in specifically from you guys to get something like that up and running. Especially when you're talking about massive beasts like the NHS, where you have to think, well, like you say, well, there are a very rapid amount of tests, a very high number of rapid tests, that came out onto the market all at exactly the same time. And which one do you pick? That's an incredibly hard job to really know. How do you base that?
It's so complicated because the prevalence was continually changing in the pandemic, obviously, and policy was always changing. And in some ways, therapeutic trials are huge and really complex. Yeah. But there is a very direct effect of giving a treatment. But diagnostics can be used in countless different ways by different sites, and by even use the different person that's using the test can affect its accuracy and how it performs.
We're acutely aware of that at the moment, aren't we? Yes, we are.
But the team are amazing. Like, some of our research did pause, and actually we had someone who just started on a 50% contract with us just a week after lockdown happened. So we've only met him once in the park, Lee's Park, for a pizza.
Really?
But apart from that, everything's been virtually. So the team are unbelievably amazing. And while it has been absolutely crazy, one of the things that come from it is there's now an understanding of the value of robust evaluation, I think. And that probably isn't portrayed brilliantly in the media, and Condor definitely aren't great at singing our own praises, but hopefully there's always going to be that need for robust evidence. And whenever kind of everything comes out in the wash, in a year's time, we've stuck to those kind of robust evidential principles.
I think that's definitely something that we could, like, that kind of, just that mentality, that kind of like sticking to those sorts of principles is something that I'm acutely aware of, because that's something that we have to do on a regular basis as well, and that we try and incorporate other people to do as they come and do work with us. And I think, like you say, if that kind of message of robustness could be taken forward, I think that's a really good, again, another good thing that people should take away. Because I know, did I read somewhere, I was trying to do some internet reading of your background, is one of your interests is not to try and improve the I'm going to get this wrong now, try and improve the diagnostic test when compared to a reference standard. So when you're looking at a lot of diagnostic tests compared to a reference standard, which is then assumed to be 100% accurate, but if the reference standard is done on the same or different software or different instrumentation or whatever, and is not ever going to be 100% accurate, because nothing is 100% accurate unless you're dealing with pure mathematics, which is 100% and 0 at the same time. Then how do you account for that kind of deviation? I thought, like, when I read that the other day, and it's something that really struck home with us, because that is something people don't often consider even when they're doing the most basic of experiments, let alone a diagnostic experiment, which, let's be fair, if you're doing a diagnostic test, people will be very surprised at how similar that is to something that they run every day in a lab. If the diagnostic test, if it's a real-time PCR, if it's something that they might use a very similar equipment, but you're going on it with a different question. But comparing it to a reference standard, that's completely bog standard for everybody in the lab, right? Right the way down from a protein assay, Bradford assay, you use standard protein standards, and you just take it for granted that it's accurate. But so is that something that you are still working on? Is that still an interest, or is it?
Absolutely. It comes down to every evaluation we come down to is choosing what's the appropriate reference standard, and then how do we describe the accuracy of the new test as compared to that reference standard, because the reference standards are never perfect.
No.
But interestingly, I had a PhD student working on that who successfully defended her viva last Thursday. So it's very topical.
Congratulations. What was her name, sorry?
Chinny. So she is part of the population health sciences
Well,
group.
congratulations to her. That's awesome to hear. I'm glad to hear that. So it sounds like at least you're fighting the good fight and successfully fighting it, at least. So.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
And the thing is that there's loads of really complicated statistical methods for overcoming an imperfect reference standard. And those aren't the people doing the evaluations in practice. No. So trying to kind of get a pragmatic solution is really interesting. But we have to do it on a case-by-case basis, really. But even as you say, like the results of a diagnostic test, people read that and trust it. But actually, even communicating the uncertainty surrounding a result is a really hard thing to do as well. So this basic 2x2 table that people always look at, it's so complicated when you drill down into the details. And that's what's been forgotten about in COVID a lot.
Yeah, I think it has taken a bit of a back. I would definitely agree with you. I think the hit to accurate scientific communication and how to effectively communicate very complicated principles and how to effectively communicate them so that you don't cause fear and you don't cause an under disproportionate response the other way. So if people aren't taking it seriously, it's because decisions and communication was wanted daily. It's almost been a bad thing. I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you have looked at BBC News every so often, but there's a morning, afternoon, and evening update on coronavirus. Now, I don't know how much practical scientific language is going into those morning, afternoon, and evening updates, but if it's not thought about carefully, then you could drastically influence how people respond to what is an ever-changing situation, and then completely change their trust levels in it. I think it is like a massive thing that will be, no doubt, plenty of PhDs and postdocs to come in the future. People talking about these sorts of things. Very briefly at the end, because I know we've talked on for a while, but I just want to bring this into to kind of involve the IMA, because what you do and what the IMA is hoping to get involved in, and what we hope our members get involved in, is so closely tied together. Like you have the job title. You are literally a methodologist. So your name is in the IMA branding. So we can't get away from it. But have you thought about getting more involved with the IMA? Have you thought about what I guess my general question would be, what do you think the IMA could do to make your life more easier? What would be a good outcome from the team for you? Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's really interesting, and I apologize. Like, it's been obviously a crazy year, so I've not
absolutely
taken
absolutely.
But Kyle Green, one of our methodologists, sits on your board, so he's a great link to us. There's a few things I think. So the team that we've grown, I am immensely proud of. They're all absolutely brilliant, and they've all got interdisciplinary skills. But one thing that I always ask whenever someone's wanting to join the team is, are they sure they're willing to give up nature papers and science papers and all of that? Because I don't feel like, or first authorship on such papers, I just don't want this to feel like a break in someone's career, because it's so different. You're supporting a lot of science, and you're definitely improving a lot of science, because a lot of the people we work with, it's opened their eyes to the things they can do and how they can do things well when they work with us. But very rarely are we getting to be the kind of first author on the massive, amazing papers. Sure. But I think that seen in a university is you're not held on as high of esteem as a professor of someone who's really specialized, like proteomics or something. Then I sometimes, or from the clinical side, so I always worry that we're bringing people into this and they don't fully actually understand what it is we do, because it's really hard to explain until you're in it, and also then regret the move because you're broadening your skill set rather than focusing it. So sure. I I think this has probably been touched on a little in the IMA theme before, but methodology shouldn't be seen like that. It should be seen as important and a key part. So from that perspective, I think it's really useful to kind of promote a bit more about that, I guess.
Yeah, and hopefully like stuff like what we're doing now and getting more of the message out there of so people understand what it is that you do. Because I think, like you said, we don't want people to feel like it's a career break. Coming from the other side of things, there will be people out there who maybe didn't get into academia. I certainly didn't, to chase Nature papers and science papers. I mainly got into academia because I wanted to help people. And I've kind of found myself in a role not too dissimilar from what you do, in that, you know, as the people who look after the instrumentation and train people, our names aren't always the first author. Sometimes we're not even mentioned on the paper, which is a bit of a slap in the face, but you're still helping people, you're still helping that research, and you see new people come through all the time, new projects come through all the time, and your day-to-day is constantly changing and evolving.
Yeah, and I think for the guys that work with us, I don't think anyone's regretted, I hope no one's regretted it, but I feel like they're all aligned in that kind of focus of wanting to help, and COVID has really made us feel like there's so much impact as well and need for it, because a lot of the research just won't happen unless you've got someone to kind of help design it or design your protocols and things. So I think it's an alternative, because I was the same. I wasn't the person that really wanted to be a PI on a specific physics project, which is probably why I didn't and knew it wasn't quite right for me. But I'm really glad what I do. Like, I love the fact that I'm talking about a new diagnostic for prostate cancer in the morning, and then I'm teaching about health economics the next day, or I'm talking about a screening test for breast cancer, or, well, multiple COVID tests all day long. And I work and collaborate with so many people, and that's what drives me. Whereas if I was back sitting modeling all day and writing papers, I would, in my kind of physics side of things, I don't think I would be still as happy as I am now. It's crazy busy all the time, but I get a lot more from it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good. I mean, it's been a real, certainly been a massive eye opener for me. I knew you guys were busy because you don't take very long breaks. Not like us, you know, layabouts in the rest of the university. We don't see you popping out of the office for very long. But
I don't allow them out. That's why.
No, that's it. You know, every so often. But no, it's really been fascinating to kind of get your insight on it, and I'd just like to say thank you very much for agreeing to join me on it.
Thank you.
I think we'll definitely have to get you speaking in front of a bigger audience, hopefully soon, if you're interested. So
Claire, our statistical methodologist, and I are talking at the series on the 24th of April, I think.
Perfect. I look forward to hearing from you both. I'll release this podcast beforehand, and then people can think of really difficult questions to ask you. They'll know everything you're going to say. But that's fantastic. Thanks ever so much for joining me, and I'll speak to you really soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.